Anyone can fall on hard times, and when people are forced to sleep on the streets, sparing some food or money can go a long way in helping them get back on their feet. However, sometimes these poor souls aren't as poor as they seem. Occasionally, the streets are home to bogus beggars, feigning disabilities and injuries to wrangle money from pitying onlookers. From conmen on crutches to fraudulent fathers, today we're going to check out a collection of scammers that decided to cheat and lie their way into a quick buck as we expose the worst fake disabled beggars ever caught. What the tuck? Let's start from the ground up, checking out a scam artist making their money sitting on the sidewalk. At first glance, this person appears to be an amputee with no choice in life but to sit on the sidewalk and ask pedestrians for cash as they walk by. However, looks can be deceiving, and in this case, the man might not be as down and out as he initially seems.
Nasa isang paa mo? Ha? Nasa isang paa mo? Nasa isang paa mo? Nasa isang paa mo? Pakita mo. Tayo ka nga.
It's a miracle! This video truly captures the healing powers of an angry passerby. The pedestrian's vocal accusations of fraud caused the beggar to miraculously regrow his missing leg, or more accurately, to reveal that his amputated leg was cleverly tucked inside his sports shorts. I'm not sure what misfortunes have led to that guy begging on the streets, but I reckon he would have a pretty profitable career as a street magician. He just made that leg appear out of nowhere. Prop comedy. Next up, we have a South African beggar who decided to use props to support his act, walking through the streets of Cape Town with a set of crutches.
Hamba kahle ke ngoku, hamba kahle. Ubukade uyephi na? Oh.
This scam artist was caught giving an Oscar-worthy performance as he stumbled in between rows of cars and asked the drivers for change. His performance was just getting started when he spotted a truck driver filming him, seeing straight through the scam. At this point, the beggar dropped the act, taking the weight off his crutches and standing up normally. As he approached the truck, he started laughing, shaking his cup as he asked the truck driver for money. Surprisingly, the truck driver obliged, putting a bill in the beggar's cup and sending him on his way. I guess a little bit of honesty goes a long way, even if you're being honest about being dishonest. Father-son bonding. So far, these bogus beggars have been one-man shows, but this next fraudster decided to recruit a tiny little accomplice to help him with his scam. There's nothing more wholesome than a family business, and unlike the South African beggar, this dad uses his kid as a crutch, propping his scam up with his son. I'm sure the kid's bandaged hand earned the duo a ton of money, but eventually somebody saw through the act, asking the father to remove the kid's bandage to prove that he was really injured. As the father unwrapped his son's bandage, without the tenderness you'd expect for a real injury, he revealed that the kid had a perfectly healthy, functioning hand. Usually a healthy, uninjured child is a good thing, but in this case, the mob surrounding the panhandler became furious, causing the visibly guilty duo to walk away and make their escape. The beggar's hardly the dad of the year, but hey, at least he's bonding with his kid. My dad wouldn't even trust me to mow the lawn. A family day out. From one family man to another, this next beggar takes family time even further, employing his wife and 4 children to help out with his scheme. This clip shows a family in Pakistan on a big day out. the father shuffling down a road as his family follows close behind. The patriarch appears to be in a pretty bad way. While he moves through the area he usually conducts his begging in. But as soon as he turns into an alleyway and sits down, his demeanor completely changes. As his children circle around him, the dad quickly changes out of his begging clothes, jumps to his feet, and walks away, the group escaping the scene of the crime. I'm sure the family thought they'd gotten away scot-free. However, someone obviously caught the entire thing on camera, and the damning footage caused a public outrage on social media and major news sites. My family day trips usually end with arguments, but this family's ended with international media uproar. That's definitely one for the scrapbook. Child prodigy. That family of fraudsters was led by their father, but this next kid decided to go it alone, doing all of his begging solo. This kid is a natural, carrying out a professional-looking scam at an incredibly young age. While his act is pretty convincing, unfortunately for him, a passing soldier saw straight through his scam, picking the kid up to reveal his healthy legs. The kid had all of his limbs, but he didn't have a leg to stand on, forced to rise to attention and sulk as the soldier walked away. That kid isn't the only young scammer that's been publicly exposed, and this teenager met a similar fate when he asked a couple of passing police officers for some change. This praying kid wanted some cash, but the policeman, clearly familiar with these kinds of antics and how to spot a fraud, had other ideas, recognizing the trick and yanking the boy to his feet. The teenager goes from begging for cash to begging to be left alone, praying for forgiveness as the men force him to stand up, exposing his scam in the process. Of course, it goes without saying that if you suspect the beggar is a phony, you shouldn't drag them to their feet, just in case they really are legitimately disabled. But in this case, the kid's fraudulent farce was indeed exposed by the police, no less. I guess he should have prayed a bit harder. Old to young. Let's leave school now, moving from some kiddie fraudsters to an elderly beggar, asking for spare change in New York. New York is famous for its hustle and bustle, and back in 2012, Inside Edition uncovered a crazy hustle going on in the city's streets. With a hunchback and a headscarf to fight the cold, this elderly beggar spends her time begging on Fifth Avenue, a street in Manhattan known for its high-end stores and luxury apartments. Fifth Avenue has been nicknamed Millionaire's Row, and as rich yuppies and businessmen walk by on their way to work, the beggar reportedly receives 50 cash donations an hour, earning tens of thousands of dollars a year. As you can imagine, a beggar earning all that money started to attract some attention from New Yorkers, and when folks began to suspect something may be amiss, investigative journalists at Inside Edition started to look into the woman's story. The journalists were suspicious of the woman, so they decided to follow her, waiting to see where she went after her day of begging was over. What they found left their jaws on the floor. The woman reportedly took a bus around the corner before hopping in the back of a minivan, and after driving around for a while, the van pulled over and the beggar hopped back out without the hunched posture, ditching the withered old babushka vibe entirely. Talk about a makeover. The beggar had transformed into a woman 50 years younger, like a conniving Benjamin Button. The investigators watched on as the scammer waltzed around the city, meeting up with friends and doing a little shopping with her ill-gotten gains. The next day, the woman was back at Fifth Avenue, hunched over and shaking. The journalist decided to confront her, but as they approached and called her out, she never broke character, simply asking the journalist if they had any spare change, before walking away and continuing her scam elsewhere. Clearly being so impressively committed to the role, perhaps she'd be better off taking her act to Broadway. Unwrapping the scam. That costume work was pretty impressive, but the New Yorker isn't the only beggar whose scam involves an elaborate custom outfit. This seemingly one-legged beggar was sitting on the floor begging for change when he was called out by an angry mob. The beggar protested, but the mob weren't going to let him get away, forcing him to expose the scam. At this point, the beggar was forced to play a solo game of Pass the Parcel, unwrapping his scam layer by layer. It turns out his leg was strapped underneath his body, held in place by 3 pairs of pants and some tight pieces of fabric. The binding was so tight that his skinny leg was nearly invisible, and the scam was only revealed when he pulled off the final layer. Despite getting caught, the lengths that this beggar went to achieve his scam is almost impressive. But as with many of the clips we've seen so far, you have to ask, when you're choosing to put yourself through this much discomfort just to earn a little money, aren't there more dignified ways of doing it than uncomfortable disabled beggar scams? I mean, sure, the McDonald's kitchens may be hot, but at least they let you have all your limbs on show while you earn your money. Lazy beggars. This next beggar didn't bother with a custom outfit, carrying out a one-armed scam that was a bit less elaborate. I feel like the guy could have put a bit more effort into his act. A slightly better costume might have made it so that as he approached cars and asked for change, it wasn't so easy for a passerby to run over and lift his loose-fitting shirt, showing that his missing arm was lazily tucked into his pants. Ultimately, though, the deception is most harmless, but the beggar isn't the only lazy fraudster out scamming in the streets. At first, this Johannesburg beggar appeared to be legless, stuck in the middle of a busy road. If the man was truly disabled, then this would be a pretty dangerous spot for him to get stuck. However, soon enough, the police came around to check on him, and their presence triggered a miracle, the legless beggar standing up and walking away. It turns out the man wasn't legless, but he was shameless, scamming pedestrians by tucking his legs into his sweater and hiding them behind a plastic bag. This trick is pretty simple, and though it might work on pedestrians, the beggar clearly didn't want to test his legless act against the long arm of the law. Low-speed chase. From one police bus to another, this next clip shows the moment that a beggar in Bogota, Colombia had his scam scuppered, when he was approached by a pair of motorcycle cops.
No, súbete al andén. No, súbete al andén, que eso no. No, súbete al andén, quita, no importa. ¿Y la ropa dónde está?
Ah, ¿no ves que me la robaron ustedes mismos? Me la llevaron y la botaron. ¿Y qué? ¿Le estoy robando algo a usted? ¿Le estoy robando algo a usted? Ah, ese sapo. Todo lo que me tienen que decir es ellos. Usted no tiene que decir nada, pero...
Ya, es la grosería.
No, un sapo metido.
Es la grosería, hermano.
No le importa nada.
Es al mocho, ahora le sale la otra pierna.
Pero no le importa nada. Mire.
Talk about getting caught with your pants down. Reportedly, the policemen recognized this swindler from a previous arrest, and they knew that he was faking his disability as they approached. They demanded that the scammer show them his injury, but the beggar protested, shouting, "I'm going to be naked." To be fair, nobody wants to see that guy in his birthday suit, but the cops called his bluff, forcing him to pull his jeans off. The beggar eventually relented, pulling off his pants and jumping to his feet, making his escape in his boxers. Thank God he wasn't wearing tighty whities. Liar lying down. They say that beggars can't be choosers, but that beggar chose to scam people out of their money. And he isn't the only one. Let's take it one leg further, checking out a fake disabled beggar that's totally legless. No, I said legless, not Legolas. Check it. Unlike his elven counterpart, this double amputee doesn't slide on shields. He rolls around on a trolley, pulling himself around as he begs for money in Luzhou, China. Unfortunately for the beggar, he was recognized by a pedestrian that had previously stood next to him on the bus that morning. The passerby had watched the supposed amputee walk on and off the bus with two perfectly healthy legs, so seeing him on the ground like this raised a few alarm bells, to say the least. Seeing through the scammer's trick, the passerby decided to expose the beggar, pulling down his pants to reveal his legs tied up behind his body. To be fair to the scam artist, he is a method actor. He still rolls away on his trolley even after being exposed to the world. Now that's commitment to a role. Accidentally exposed. While some fake beggars get exposed by passers-by with an intent on revealing their scam, this next fellow was just a bit unlucky as a woman exposed his scam by accident. That guy got exposed in every sense of the word, as the woman's misstep revealed his scam and his underwear. That said, to be honest, that video feels a little too good to be true. And the fact that someone conveniently happened to be filming this supposed accident suggests that there's a good chance that it's staged. The video might be as fake as that beggar's disability, but either way, the video does show that these bogus beggars are so common in some countries that they're starting to get parodied online. In fact, the scam artists are so widespread, their antics have also been parodied in TV shows and commercials like this one from Thailand. Pretty hilarious. I just hope that commercial doesn't give the scam artists out there any ideas. Contortionist. Unlike the beggar in that commercial, most real scammers never expose their tricks to the public. However, in 2015, Bangladeshi beggar Sajan Raju decided to capitalize on the publicity and attention that fake beggar scams garner by showing off his tricks on TV. Sajan puts the con in contortionist, twisting his body to convince pedestrians that he suffers from a disability. If Sajan wanted to, I'm sure he could get a job in the circus, seeing as that level of sustained contortion is actually pretty impressive. However, his street scams are allegedly pretty lucrative, giving him no reason to apply for a full-time job. Sajan claims that he earns around $500 a month from panhandling, and that's around 4 times the average monthly salary in Bangladesh. For most people, begging on the streets feels like a last resort, but with that salary, Sajan's scam somehow actually beats working a 9 to 5. Indeed, it's rumored that some of these fraudsters actually earn far more money than they could at a regular job, depending on where they're based, so they opt to beg on the streets for very real financial gain. While that may explain why these people are willing to sit in highly uncomfortable positions all day, before you quit your job and head to the sidewalk, remember that these scammers don't get dental cover, so it's probably best to stick to the office. A handy scam. While we've seen plenty of leg-related scamming so far, journalists from Chinese Central Television came across this beggar a few years back, who seems to have gone for more of a no hands, no feet approach. Dragging himself down the road on his arms, he was seen using an empty paint can to collect his cash. The man's act is fairly convincing, even if it is a bit confusing as to what is exactly he's presenting as wrong with his body. However, the cameraman soon revealed that this stump-handed beggar had a trick up his sleeve. The trick in this case was his hands, and the camera later captured the fraudster sat up straight with his hands out of his sleeves counting the bills, no longer caring about keeping his secret hidden now that the day's work was over. Not a bad profit from a day of work, at the very least enough to pay for the bus home. Caught regular-handed. Let's stick to the hands now, moving from a disappearing disability to a disappearing wound. This beggar claimed to have been involved in a terrible accident, leaving her hand severely wounded. While begging, the woman was spotted by a policeman, who saw straight through her scam, walking over to the woman to expose her on camera. The policeman confronted her, grabbing her wrist and unwrapping her bandages. As the bandages disappeared, so did her injuries, the cop revealing a perfectly healthy hand under the dressing. If the woman really was injured, then that would have been pretty awkward. But in this case, the officer protected and served her some sweet justice, catching the woman red-handed. Or rather, red-bandaged? Blind man's bluff. A lot of these beggars put a huge amount of work into their acts, taping, tucking, or creating special outfits to help perfect their scams. This next guy didn't bother going to all that effort, deciding to earn some money by pretending to be blind. Unfortunately for this scammer, his blind man's bluff wasn't very strong. This woman exposing his scam with her handbag, proving that when he's under attack, he can see just fine. While that clip, as I'm sure you'll agree, certainly has the feel of another scripted setup and poorly acted video, there are other clips to be found online that are a little more convincing. Here's another example of a passerby calling out a blind man's bluff that emerged online in the mid-2010s, and may have even inspired the one we just saw. This beggar was trying to rob pedestrians blind, donning a pair of sunglasses to trick people into giving him money. Unfortunately for him, this passerby saw straight through his disguise, and instead of turning a blind eye, he decided to expose him. As the pedestrian threatens to kick the beggar, he jumps back in shock, attempting to escape the impact. Now, granted, we may be witnessing a real-life Matt Murdock here, able to sense the world around him through heightened hearing. But given all that dishonesty we've seen so far, I'm certainly more inclined to believe we have another certified scammer on our hands. Well, either that or it's another pair of fake beggar video fakers, both of them in on the truth, who fake their way into fooling the internet into thinking that any part of their fake filmed setup is real. But what do you think? True blindness, fake beggar, or entirely fake scenario? Let me know in the comments down below. The secret of youth. Those blind beggars aren't the only scammers that were exposed by some physical intervention. In Nizhny Novgorod, Russia, a homeless elderly woman was begging for money when she was approached by a puzzled pedestrian. The passerby looked past her headscarf and glasses, noticing something very strange about the woman. As the man approached, he asked her, "Hi, Granny, don't you want to show your face?" After the woman refused, he removed her glasses and headscarf, revealing a young woman with black hair. I've heard that hair dye and moisturizer can work wonders these days, but in this case, the scammer was clearly a young to middle-aged woman posing as a decrepit elderly person for sympathy and money. People will do anything for those senior citizen discounts. So that a legitimate old lady was more interested in her bankroll than boiled candies, but there's still something important to remember here. The vast majority of people on the streets genuinely do need our help, and the work of a few scam artists shouldn't stop you from giving to those in need. So despite there being plenty of examples online of fakery, remember that these are the minority. You'd be best off assuming most down on their luck folks, especially those with evident disabilities, are in need of a helping hand rather than being exposed as frauds. And if you see a suspiciously young-looking babushka lady panhandling for loose change, no need to call her out. Just take smug comfort in the fact that you know what's really up. So, which scam shocked you the most? Have you ever spotted a fake disabled beggar yourself? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.